Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, let's discuss about Angular services. So before we actually start coding it, let's understand what is the Angular service. So basically, Angular services are objects that get created only once during the application startup. That means it will be created only once, and services maintain the data and hold the data and make it available to all the components at all the times. And to use a service within the component, it should be injected into the component constructor. This is called as dependency injection, and service is another way of sharing the data between the components. And to use the service, there is no need to have any sort of relationship between the components. Services can share the data to any component. Hello everyone, let's understand Angular service with a real-time example. So right now I just have a plain blank application. If you see, this is just a plain blank application. So let's write some code and write the service and understand the service, how what is the purpose of it and how it is used in the real-time application. So for this particular example, so there is a website called dummy.json where they provide sample dummy APIs that can be used and in our testing. So I'll read the data from this particular dummy API. I'll pass the ID, product ID, and get the response, and I'll display that data on the this particular UI. Okay. So to start with, let me take a div. So before we start this, let's start by making the API call first, then we'll display the content on the UI. So basically, to make the API call, we need a service. So I'm using ng generate service, since we are going to access this particular phone related API. So let's create a service saying phone. Okay, so I'm using Angular schematics to create the service. So now the service is created. Okay, so within the service, to access the REST API, first and foremost thing, we need to use Angular HTTP module. So I'm including this HTTP client. Okay, so this is the HTTP client that we need to access a REST API, and within this I'll write a method, and the method name would be get phone data by ID. So it will get a ID as a string, and within this we'll make the API call using this .http . Since this is a get method, we call the get, and there is no authentication right now. Since this is a dummy API, I'm directly using this dummy API, so there is no authentication process. So now the URL is going to be plus the ID, product ID. Okay, and this is how we can make the API call to a REST endpoint using a service. And now that we created a service and included the HTTP client and calling the API, and there is one more thing related to HTTP. If you want to use a HTTP client in the app module, we need to add HTTP client module, otherwise it won't work. So let's add HTTP client module, and this, then only we will be able to use the HTTP features. to make the API call. This is the first step. So right now we have a API. Now let's write the TypeScript code to get hold of that service. To get hold of the service, first and foremost thing, we need to import the service here. We need to inject the service here. So the phone service. So now I injected the phone service, so I can access the phone service now. So initially what I'll say is I'll call this method as get phone data by ID, and I'll pass the type or ID, and within this I'm going to use this phone service and call the method. Okay, I'll pass this same ID as a parameter, and I'll subscribe to this particular API, and once I get the data out of it, so from this, once I get the data, I'll assign this data to a results object, result field, and I'll just define this result as any, so that it will get hold of these results. So now that so far we created a service and we are making the API call and getting the data, and in the TypeScript class we are calling that service method and getting the results. Now that we have a result, now we should focus on displaying the writing the UI code, HTML code to access and hit this function and display the data on the UI. Okay, now let me take a div. Within this div, I'll add a text box to input the ID, input type text, and to get hold of this value, I'll use ng model, and I'll say it is ID, phone ID, and I'll add a placeholder saying search by ID, and this will have a text box, and let's go and see. Right now property ID is not used. Okay, this particular ID is not there, that's why it is throwing error. And what we can do is we'll just define an ID. Initially it will be empty, and let the user to enter. Okay, this is the search by ID. Okay, let's push this to center. Okay, let's add a class called container. Okay, this particular container is of a bootstrap container. Okay, and right now, since I got this, what I'll do is I'll have a button, and I'll say search, and so here I added a button. I'll say on the click event of click of this button, on click of this button, what I'll do is I'll call this particular function, and it is accepting ID. So since this is ng model, and since it is decorated with the ng model directive, it will follow the two-way data binding. As soon as I type something in this text box, it will be by default binded to this particular function. Okay, so when I click this, it will make this particular API call. From here it will go to the service, and it will make the API call, and it will get the data. Now let's just test this piece. So within the network piece, we need to select the fetch XHR, and let's search. So now I made the API call, and if you see the response, I got this response, okay, from that API, and the same response, this is the response, similar response. Okay, I hit this particular one, and if I search by 2, I can get the different response, and this is iPhone X and the previous one is iPhone 9. Let me change it to 5. There is one more API call, and this is different phone. Okay, now that we are getting the data, now we'll display that data under this particular text box and the search box. Will display the data under this. Okay, so since we got this data here, I'll just within this div, okay, I'll take one more div to display the data. Of course we need a table, or at least we'll show it in a better format. So the results are part of the results. So within this I'll use Angular 17 version of ng if condition. If there are results, okay, then we'll display take the table within this. We'll create a table and display the data here, and if there is no data, else we'll display no results yet. User not searched yet to see the results. Okay, let's remove this. Now we need to use a table and display that results. Okay, so within this I'll create a table. So basically if there are no results, it will display this content, and if there are results, it will display whatever we are going to add here. Let's see how it is showing. Right now user not searched yet to see the results. Okay, since we didn't search, and once we search, still it is not showing anything because there is no data. Results are still empty. Okay, so now within this particular table we'll use a bootstrap CSS just to see the table little bit better. And within the table, of course, we'll have a table header. Within the table header we need to take a table row. Within this it will have a table, each table head, and let's see what we want to display. Out of which maybe we'll take the title. We'll display the title. Okay, and we'll take few more fields, maybe the description. Okay, let's take the description, and we'll take maybe one more field. Let's take this price. So from that API we will try to display these 3 fields only right now. So the table header is done. Now within the table header we need a table body. Okay, for that we use a table body, and within this we'll have a table row, within this table data. Okay, since we are searching for only one record at a time, there is no need of any for loop right now. So instead we'll display this data. The results are going to be results, and results dot, to get the data, results dot title, and we'll display the 3 more fields, and description and price. Let's see how this is rendering. Okay, now you see the data displaying in the table. So right now, So what is happening? Let's try to understand. So on the page load, I'm just displaying a text box and a search button. Since there are no results, I'm showing this. When I search, you should go to the network section and select the fetch XHR. When I click search, there is an API call, and if you see the URL, this is the API call that I'm hitting, and this is the dummy API web page, and I'm using this particular dummy API to get the data. And when I hit this one, the only parameter that I passed was this last one, the number 1. It's a path parameter. And when we look at the response here, this is the response that we got for that API call. And at this point of time, I'm displaying only 3 fields. Remaining fields, if you want, we can add it. But this particular API call that we made using Angular service. Okay, let's go to the code and see. So when I search, when I click this button, search button, when I click this search button, I'm calling this particular function, passing this ID. Since it is annotated with this directive, automatically as soon as I type something here, this value will be automatically updated. That is the beauty of Angular with a two-way data binding. And when I click this button, it is hitting this particular function and getting that ID, whatever I typed in the text box here, whatever I typed. And what we are doing, we injected this phone service. This is a dependency injection, and I am using this phone service, calling its phone service method within the service, get phone data by ID. I am passing this ID, okay, and I subscribed to that API, okay, this API. And once I receive the data from the API call, I am assigning this data to the results, and this results, since Angular works with a two-way data binding, as soon as I attach the results to it, this particular content will be displayed by default since there are results, okay. And I'm just taking that result of single object and displaying this title, description and price. This is how the Angular service works in real time. Thank you for tuning in. See you in the next video.